What's going on? Happy Red Friday. Welcome in. I am Farzine Vasugi and the host of the Chief Zone podcast. Also combining tonight's show with the Red Friday live chat, since it is a Red Friday. There's been some significant stories that have come up with the Kansas City Chiefs. Felt like it was necessary to do one of those things that we do every once in a while, which is combine the Chief Zone with the Red Friday live chat. So here we are. Let's chat. Let's have some fun here. A lot of things to discuss on the docket today. The Chiefs' week 1 match reportedly has been leaked. I'll tell you who it's going to be against, what day of the week in week 1, and what country will it be in. So we'll discuss that. The Chiefs also want to play on a certain day every single day of the NFL season. Moving on a holiday. We'll discuss that. The Chiefs are bringing back a former Chief. I'll tell you who that is. And what will Kansas City do in the draft this year? All of that and more here on this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. I appreciate all of you who are watching live on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Hope you're all having a great week. We are less than a month away from the NFL draft. Yes, it is the month of April already. It is the month of April already. Want to let you know this podcast is brought to you by SeatGeek. That is where I go to for all of my sports ticketing needs, whether it's Chiefs football, Royals baseball. Obviously, we've got some events happening this month outside of Kansas City. Of course, everyone's going to be watching the Final Four and the national championship game on Monday. But in Kansas City, obviously, Royals baseball is in full swing. At the end of the month, there's going to be a TKO takeover in Kansas City. PBR, UFC Fight Night, and WWE Raw all coming to Kansas City at T-Mobile Center. If you want to catch any of the action, you can go to SeatGeek and get your tickets from there. New customers can use my promo code Farzine and save $20 off their first order from SeatGeek. Go to SeatGeek.com, pick your tickets, and at checkout, new customers, don't forget, put in that promo code Farzine to save $20 off your first order from SeatGeek. All right, like I said, this is going to be kind of a combined podcast. We'll do the Chief Zone and the Red Friday live chat together. So for those of you coming in, appreciate you guys. Put in your questions below. We will get to those later on as the podcast goes on tonight. I do want to start off. The Chiefs have made a couple of headlines this week, and the one that caught my attention the most, and this is kind of where I want to start because this did get a lot of reactions. The Chiefs, they are rumored, again, this is just a rumor, but it is coming from The Athletic, which is a reputable source. This is coming from Nate Taylor and also the Athletic reporter who covers the Chargers. And I apologize, I did not catch the reporter's name. But those two did a joint report, a joint article together. And it's going to be the Chiefs and the Chargers. They are expected to play in week 1. The Chargers are the designated home team. And notice I said the designated home team because this game is not going to be played in SoFi Stadium. It's not even going to be in LA or the state of California. This game is expected to be played in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Yes, the Chiefs are going to South America, according to The Athletic, for their week 1 game. And that is expected to take place on Friday. I believe that is September the 5th. Yes, September the 5th. So that would mean the Eagles would have their banner night on Thursday, April the 4th. We don't know who against yet, but we do know, according to one report, that the Chiefs will play the Chargers in Brazil. So this one got a lot of reactions. Obviously, last year, for the first time ever in NFL history, we had an NFL game in Brazil. It was between the Eagles and the Packers. And by the way, that game was exclusively on Peacock. Now, I believe for anyone that was living in the Green Bay and Philadelphia areas, I believe you got it on a local channel, kind of like when Kansas City has played on Netflix or on Prime Video. They'll have one of their games on one of the local networks. Most of the time, it's usually Channel 41. I do know the Netflix Christmas game last year was on KCTV 5, which was a surprise to me because Channel 41 is the local. They're the home of the Chiefs. They get all the preseason games and any of the nationally broadcast games or any of those that are on streaming. So I was surprised that Channel 5 had it last year on Netflix, but I think it's safe to assume that KSHB 41, they will have that week 1 game, assuming it's true that they're playing Friday night in Brazil. That will be probably on KSHB. Now, again, this got a lot of reactions here. It's not going to be a home game taken away from the Chiefs, a home game taken away from Arrowhead. I saw one person joke around that, oh, the Chiefs are not going to go to Missouri nor Kansas. They're gonna move to Brazil. I saw that joke there, so I got a kick out of that one. But naturally speaking, this got some reactions. I remember the very first time the Chiefs were scheduled to give up a home game as the designated home team. They were playing the Lions, and that ended up being scheduled for not Brazil, London. And a lot of people were not happy about that. And I think someone mentioned this too. I completely forgot about this. That was the same day the Royals beat the New York Mets in Game 5 to win the World Series. And so the word I got was that a lot of the Chiefs players, I mean, the entire organization that made that trip and back, including team reporters, PR guys, whoever, they all missed the Royals winning the World Series. I mean, listen, the Royals don't win the World Series in Kansas City often. It happens once every 30 years. So they missed out on that special moment. But hey, I guess, everyone kind of has their own special way of finding out about that kind of thing, their own unique way. Not that, the NFL can control over what you will and won't miss if you travel internationally and whatnot. But I think the complaint is, hey, why are we taking games out of the United States? And here's the thing, because when I posted this, there were a couple of Eagles and Packers fans who were like, hey, where was your outrage last year when we had to play in Brazil? Well, let's be honest here. NFL fans don't really care until something impacts them. And that's just the truth here. I've never been a fan of sending regular season games internationally. Here's what I would rather see, especially with this new schedule format where we have 18 weeks and 3 preseason games. I think how it should be, you play 1 home preseason game in week 1. I mean, obviously only 16 teams can do it. Then you flip it for week 2, play an away game. And then in week 3, there's no designated home team or designated away team. Well, I guess you kind of have to designate someone as a home team for jersey purposes. Whoever gets to wear the home jerseys and whoever has to wear the away jerseys, I suppose. But that week 3 game, everyone plays internationally. And listen, I know no one wants to see Patrick Mahomes play for just a drive or a quarter or not at all. I mean, the people internationally don't buy a ticket because they want to watch Gardner Minshew versus Carson Wentz in a preseason game. Well, listen, sorry, not sorry. I don't want potential premier regular season games played overseas. I want them played in the United States where the NFL is. And like, for example, the Chiefs giving up a home game to play in Germany against the Dolphins. What was everyone's reaction at the time? That is a potential playoff game, which they ended up meeting in the playoffs, sure enough. But it ended up being in the frozen tundra in front of an 1/8 of the capacity at Arrowhead that night. But my whole thing is, I'm just not a fan of taking these games out of your own stadiums. I'm just not. Chiefs, Chargers, I mean, listen, these are 2 playoff teams. So you're taking a potential playoff matchup and taking it to a whole nother country. And listen, I don't know what the long-term goal is with the international series. I know there's all this talk about having a game in London, or a team in London, excuse me. Folks, that is never going to work. First of all, I think Teddy Bruschi said this very early when he retired from the NFL and joined ESPN's broadcasting crew. Teddy Bruschi made a comment that, when training camp ends, when the preseason ends, and when teams make that roster cut, that's usually around late August. Well, what happens in late August throughout most of the country? Late August or early September. That's also back to school time, and a lot of NFL players. Let's be honest. Some of them are journeymen. Some of them change teams every couple of years, and they bring their family, their wives, their kids with them. So, and sometimes we see trades occur during these roster cuts here. Now, whether it's during a 53-man roster cut or just in the middle of the season, like let's say, and I'm just going to pick a random name, but let's just say Hollywood Brown, okay? Let's say Hollywood Brown gets traded from the Chiefs to the London Monsters, whatever you want to call them. I mean, do you not realize what kind of a massive shift that will be? I mean, you got to get your passport and you got to figure out your citizenship situation. Like, how is that going to work? And then, by the way, what are you going to do? Are you going to stay away from your family and go halfway across the world and play football? Currency, like all of those things. I don't think people realize the logistics of that kind of thing are just not going to work. And then the other part of it too is if you're an assistant coach wanting to move up and get a positional job, whether it's quarterbacks, running backs, whatever, or you want to be a coordinator, well, you're probably going to try really hard to avoid that London team and try to see if there's a job opening on any of the other 32 teams or however many teams they want to do it with, or maybe they move Jacksonville to London. I don't know. That's not going to work logistically. I mean, no one's going to want to. Now, I know what some of you are going to say. Well, what about Toronto? We have an NBA team and an MLB team in Toronto, and we also have some Canadian teams in the NHL there. Well, I would argue, sure, some of those issues that I'm bringing up are still relevant in those leagues, but it's also still part of North America. I mean, Canada's not too far from the United States. Now, if your hometown is in Texas and you play in Canada, sure, that might be a bit of a lengthy trip there, but it's not going to be too long of a trip. I think these athletes are used to traveling frequently anyways, but it's just not going to work. Moving internationally, having to really change your whole life just to play for the London football team. I mean, it's just not going to work out here. Listen, I knew this was going to happen anyway, whether we like it or not. I personally don't like it. It seems like a lot of you certainly took issue with it. I'll say this. I mean, I like waking up at 8:30 Central Time and having NFL football on. That is kind of cool. But, at the same time, I don't want it to happen on the expense of one of the teams in the United States. Mickey mentions this, the home team loses money. Yeah, I'm sure the league benefits from this. And Chris, you're kind of alluding to this as well. But, think of those people that work at the parking lots, at the gate entrances, security inside the stadium. Now, those people all have regular jobs and they'll take off if the Chiefs have to play on a Thursday or a Monday, whatever, because you only work at the stadium just a few times a week. And those are people who definitely need a side hustle for whatever reason they may need it. But to take away one of those games from your employees, yeah, I'm not down with that. I'm personally not. And I know there's going to be a flip side to this because we'll talk about the Christmas situation in a moment here. But here's the other thing too. Like I said, I knew that, a Chiefs international game was probably going to happen this year. But man, if there was one place I did not want the Chiefs to go to, would have been Brazil. And if you watched last year's game between the Packers and the Eagles, you saw a lot of slippage on the field. Now, to be clear, the NFL stadiums, not all of them are perfect and taken care of very well. I mean, the Raiders, which, by the way, Allegiant Stadium, great stadium, but my God, their grounds crew does a piss poor job taking care of that field there. They just do. I mean, it literally looks like they just let out a bunch of dogs and they just took a shit all over the field. I mean, that's what the field looks like. The stadium's great. Nothing bad to say at all about the stadium. But my God, that field, I truly question. I mean, do they even have an actual grounds crew, or do they just, or like, what do they even do? There are some NFL stadiums that are guilty of not taking good care of their fields. If you remember, the Chiefs and Rams were supposed to play in Mexico City several years ago. They ended up moving that back to LA, which because LA was a designated home team. And props to all the fans in LA. They packed the stadium for that one there. That was before SoFi Stadium was built. I think it was at the Rose Bowl. That ended up being a historic game, in both teams scoring in the 50s. But they got out of Mexico City because of terrible field conditions. Footage got out there of some soccer players practicing on that field, and the field conditions were just god awful. And then a year later, the Chiefs ended up playing in Mexico City against the Chargers. So this would make it the second time the Chiefs and Chargers play internationally. And there was a lot of slip and sliding happening in that game as well. Look, someone commented and said, well, why don't you give him another chance? I'm sure, I suppose. But man, part of me like looks at that and okay, it's a divisional game, but I do not want Patrick Mahomes or any of the starters out there. Like, I'm sorry to Gardner Minshew and any of the other backups on the team. I just don't want to see any of the starters go play on those field conditions. I just don't. Hopefully I'm proven wrong and the field conditions are actually good and taken care of. That would be ideal, but I'm not banking on that happening. Now, to transition here, we also learned not necessarily any specific details, but the Kansas City Chiefs have made a request. This happened. This report came out of the league meetings this past week. The Chiefs have made a request to be a regular fixture on Christmas Day for the NFL. And by the way, speaking of Christmas Day, and I would love your guys' thoughts on this. Would you like to see the Chiefs play on Christmas every single year? And I'll read you guys' comments on this as we go. Now, the Chiefs, they played on Christmas each of the last 2 years. They played the Raiders a couple of years ago. Not a very memorable game. In fact, that's the last time the Chiefs lost at home. And then they played on Christmas last year. This time they actually traveled to Pittsburgh playing the Steelers. This year, the NFL did announce that there will be a Christmas triple header. 2 of the games will be on Netflix. 1 will be on Prime. And I think the reason for this is because Christmas Day this year falls on a Thursday. Yeah, Thursday, the 25th in December. So that is so they can fulfill their Thursday night football obligations with Amazon Prime Video. And so whoever the 2 teams are, they'll be on Prime that night. I would assume the Prime game is going to be streamed at night. And then the other 2 games, the other 4 teams will be earlier in the day on Netflix, probably, an 11:30 or 12 o'clock Central game. And then you'll probably have another one at 3:50, kind of like Thanksgiving, kind of like the Thanksgiving triple header. Now, I mentioned earlier, you have a lot of NFL employees at these stadiums, and these people only work a few games a year because you only have 10, 11, maybe 12 home games, depending on how far you go in the playoffs. But is it really necessary to have the same people work on Christmas every year? Now, the Chiefs might not be a home team every single year unless that's going to be part of the deal for them to be a fixture on Christmas. Kind of like how the Cowboys have a home game on Thanksgiving every year. And you also have, I believe, the Detroit Lions. They play a home game every year. The Chiefs want to be a fixture on Christmas. And my whole thing on this, as a fan, I mean, I don't mind it too much. I will say, as a podcaster and a content creator, I mean, I'd like to relax a bit on Christmas. I don't want to have to every single Christmas do a podcast and all this stuff, but I guess that's what we sign up for. Now, my side of things is not too strenuous or grueling or anything like that. Whereas Somebody like the beat reporter for the Kansas City Star or for ESPN, those guys actually have to physically be present at the stadium, whether it's going to be at Arrowhead or on the road. Again, I don't know if the Chiefs are trying to make it so they're at home every year for Christmas. But do you want to see the Chiefs play on Christmas every year? Me, I would prefer no. Every once in a while would be fine. I remember they played the Raiders, I think in 05 or 04 on Christmas. That was fun. And I think the next time after that you saw the Chiefs on Christmas, I believe was 2016. And I think that was the same night the Chiefs won the AFC West. And that was against the Broncos. That was the night Dontari Poe threw a touchdown pass to Demetrius. Yeah, remember Demetrius Harris? Remember our little thing back then? Anytime Demetrius Harris caught a pass? Yes. that was our thing back then. With Demetrius Harris. We'd play the air horns on the podcast anytime he caught a pass. We couldn't believe it. He caught a pass. But neither here nor there. And then, of course, they played the Raiders a couple of years ago and played the Steelers last year on Christmas Day. Felix Anudike Uzama, who I do want to talk about later on, because he did an interview with Kay Adams on her YouTube show, Up and Adams. He was asked about the possibility of playing on Christmas every year, because ever since FAU has been in the league, he's played on Christmas every year. He's also been in the Super Bowl every year, too. I mean, poor FAU. What a life. Now, I'm not going to feel terrible for the players because they're making a lot of money anyway. And so if they need to adjust their Christmas plans with their families, I'm sure their family members are all willing to adjust with them, given the nature of what they do and how much money they're making. So it's not going to be too difficult of a thing. But FAU did mention that they came back home late that day because they played on Christmas. I don't know how late, I don't know exactly, but he brought that up. Now, is it possible he's echoing the thoughts of a lot of NFL players out there that play on Thanksgiving or on Christmas? Yeah, possibly. I mean, listen, I know these NFL players, they love what they do for a living because, one, they love the sport, and two, they make a lot of money playing a kid's game, essentially. That's what you hear a lot of people say. But my thing is, if you're playing on the same holiday every year, I mean, do you, assuming you would like to stay with the Chiefs your entire career, do you have to adjust your Christmas duties all year? And then the other part of it, and I've seen people point this out, is the workers who have to work Christmas every year. Now, again, those, I know what I mentioned earlier about taking away a home game, taking it to another country such as Brazil, UK, Germany, and so on. So those workers at the stadium, they only work a few games a year. 10 to 12, maybe 13, depending on how far you get in the playoffs and how many home games you have, because it's different every year. But man, no one wants to work on Christmas. I mean, let's be honest, nobody wants to work on Christmas. I used to work on Christmas. And in fact, I used to work multiple holidays. I worked for 610 Radio here in Kansas City a while back, and I worked on Thanksgiving night and worked on Christmas morning. Those were not fun, and those are the things you have to do in sports media, especially if you're young and new to the industry. So I learned that very early. Whenever I worked for the Royals, part of their stadium production crew, I did work on holidays like Memorial Day, the 4th of July, Labor Day. I mean, that wasn't terrible. I mean, those aren't usually the holidays you care to be off too much. I think I only ended up working 1 4th of July for the Royals, but I did work on Memorial and Labor Day a couple of times. Listen, I'll just say this now. I made pretty good money when I was working those jobs. So certainly did not complain about working on holidays whenever I was working for the Royals, because you got to understand, when you're Ryan Lefevre, who's a fantastic play-by-play announcer for the Kansas City Royals on TV, and sometimes he does it for the Royals radio network, Ryan understands that with that job, he probably will be away from family on some holidays, such as Memorial Day weekend, Labor Day, 4th of July. In fact, if you're full-time job is covering baseball, you probably don't get to have the luxury of a summer vacation, unfortunately. But that is what you sign up for when you do this. Now, again, I don't feel terrible for the athletes that make a lot of money and have to adjust their holiday plans. Like, come on, yeah, sure, they're human just like us, but given the nature of what they do, they can adjust a lot of things just fine. In fact, because the Chiefs play on Thursday, I think you can treat that like a regular Thursday night football where, okay, you play on Christmas, at least for this year, and then you're off for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They let you go. You're on your own for that weekend. So the Chiefs players and any other NFL player that plays on Christmas Day this year, they'll figure that out because it's on a Thursday and they'll get the whole weekend off. But the average person that has to work on those holiday games, it's a different experience for them. Nobody wants to work on a holiday, but there are a lot of people who have to look at the people that work at hotels and gas stations, and they're not making a lot of money, especially compared to an NFL player doing what they do. But that's that's what you sign up for when you do those kinds of things. So there's that. The Chiefs reportedly wanting to be a fixture on Christmas Day every year for the NFL. All right, let's get into some actual Chiefs football news now, as word got out earlier this week, and it has not been official yet, but it probably will be sometime this week. The Kansas City Chiefs are bringing back and have signed safety Mike Edwards. Of course, if you guys remember, Mike Edwards was with the Chiefs for a couple of years. He went on to join the Buffalo Bills and played with them. Actually, he changed teams quite a lot. He went to the Bills, he went to the Titans, and he went to the Bucks. I did not realize that. He played for a lot of teams. Was let go by the Bills in early November, and then was with the Titans for just a week. And then he was claimed off waivers by the Buccaneers, joining them for a second stint. I think this is a solid signing for Kansas City. When Mike Edwards was with the Chiefs during the 2023 season, and that was the only season he was with the Chiefs for the first time. So correction on that. I thought he had played another season for some reason. But for Mike Edwards to come back, I do think that is a good addition for the Kansas City Chiefs secondary, because if you guys recall that 2023 season, and I know a lot of people may not want to recall some of the negative things that happened that year with the Chiefs, specifically on offense. That was when they led the NFL in drops by a very wide margin. And so what happened? How were the Chiefs able to survive, win the division, and advance to the playoffs? Well, their defense really came through. And it wasn't one specific individual that was thriving statistically. I mean, Chris Jones played well, George Karlaftis, Deshaun Wharton, Mike Dana. I mean, that entire defensive line was very good. Charles Omenihu, when he came back from his suspension, that Chiefs defense was pretty damn good. The problem was the offense just couldn't provide a balance. So the Chiefs had that really strong defensive front. They had a great group of linebackers led by Nick Bolton. That was Drew Tranquill's first year with the Chiefs. Leo Chenal played a little bit. Willie Gay, a fantastic run-stopping linebacker. And then their secondary that year. That was when Trent McDuffie was in his second season. In fact, the Chiefs had a lot of cornerbacks that were in their second years. And I think they're still on the team today. Guys like Nazeeh Johnson. Actually, I take that back. Nazeeh Johnson didn't play that year due to an injury, but you had Josh Williams, you had Jalen Watson, L'Jarius Sneed, not a second-year player, but he was part of your secondary back then and had a phenomenal 2023 season. Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed, probably the best cornerback duo in the NFL that year. Now, you didn't see it statistically. Trent McDuffie took forever to get his first career interception, but Sneed and McDuffie, they were just lockdown corners that year. You hardly saw wide receivers beating them down the field. Happened maybe a couple of times. But in general, that Chiefs secondary was very good. And that group of safeties, Brian Cook up until his injury, Justin Reed, who, obviously has moved on to the Saints. And I've said many times, I think he's probably one of the more underappreciated players during this dynasty run that the Chiefs have had. And then Mike Edwards, who was very active in rotation and did a lot of good things in coverage that a lot of people just didn't notice. Of course, he had that interception early on in the playoff game against the Dolphins that same year in the wild card round. And of course, a week before that, the Chiefs played in the they played in LA against who was it against? Yeah, the Chargers. Yeah, it was the Chargers because that was a Week 18 game. Both teams put in their backups. The Chargers, their season was long over by that point, and the Chiefs had locked up the 3 seed as division winners, so they played for nothing in that game. And Mike Edwards had a scoop 6 in that game. That ended up being the only touchdown of the game. All the other scores were field goals in that game between Harrison Butker and I believe Dicker, the kicker, was on the team back then. So that's the type of game that was. I think Mike Edwards. Now, why didn't things work out for Mike Edwards in Buffalo or any of these other 2 teams? That I can't say because I did not follow Mike Edwards closely when he was on those other teams. But he did well when he was in Kansas City in 2023, and I think he's good for depth purposes. I think the expectation is for Kansas City with Justin Reed moving on, and this is why you drafted Jaden Hicks, is that you have Brian Cook and Jaden Hicks as your primary safeties, and I think Mike Edwards is going to be an active part of your safety rotation. And I know there's a lot of hype behind Jaden Hicks. If you guys remember Jaden Hicks, he didn't play a lot of snaps on defense in the first, 13, 14 weeks. And then when the Chiefs played 3 games in the span of 11 days, which they prevailed in all those games, by the way, a lot of people thought they would struggle and lose that number 1 seed to Buffalo, which they didn't, and ended up being a difference maker in the AFC Championship game. Jaden Hicks played a lot during those 3 games in 11 days. And he really showed out during that stretch. I like what Jaden Hicks showed during that stretch. And obviously the Chiefs needed a lot of active bodies on defense to try to keep all their players fresh during that quick stretch there, a very short window. And Jaden Hicks really pulled through for the Chiefs during that time. We didn't see much of him afterwards, and I was hoping the Chiefs would give him more opportunities in the postseason. We didn't see much of it, but with Justin Reed moving on, we're seeing it now. I know Brett Veach, he did a press conference right after the 53-man roster cut with the media, and he mentioned that he was catching up with Tyrann Mathieu, who obviously moved on and is playing with the New Orleans Saints. And he mentioned they were going back and forth, talking about family and whatnot, and Tyrann Mathieu made a comment saying that Jaden Hicks reminds him of himself. So when you have that kind of ringing endorsement from Tyrann Mathieu of all safeties, that's when you know you got a really good safety. I mean, I'd like to think Tyrann Mathieu has a pretty good grasp of those kinds of things, knowing what kind of safety will blossom and whatnot. Listen, not that he'll ever speak up publicly and say, "Oh, this safety, yeah, you guys drafted a guy who's going to suck." I mean, no player is ever going to say that. Players are always going to be they're going to try to encourage one another in the NFL. That's always how it works in the NFL. But I think for Tyrann Mathieu to say that kind of thing, that's something that's going to stick, and I think that just adds a little bit of hype to the player, that this is someone who is expected to do good things for you in Kansas City. So I like to see what Jaden Hicks is going to do. I'm glad Mike Edwards is on the team, because that is going to be your big veteran presence right there, someone who's been around the league for a long time. When was his first year in the league? I think it was 2019. Yeah, 2019 with the Bucks. He was a 3rd-round pick out of Kentucky that year, so ended up being the 99th pick. So I think it's a really good addition for Kansas City secondary, and you'll have that active rotation. He's going to play a lot of snaps on defense because he knows the scheme, he knows the defense, he knows what Spags expects out of him. So I think that's going to be a player that you're going to see a lot of in 2025 for that Chiefs defense. Now, before we go into some other stuff here, I do want to stick with the Chiefs defense and talk about a player that I did not have any plans of really talking about, but he did an interview with Kay Adams on her YouTube show, Up and Adams, and Yeah, he had some interesting things to say. I mentioned earlier, it's Felix Anudike-Uzomah. He chimed in on the whole Christmas Day game and how he feels about playing on that game. He says he likes it, but also doesn't like it. So he gave that kind of an answer, to be clear, on that Christmas topic earlier. But Kay Adams, and I thought it was a very good question. She asked, what's expected of you moving up? And he mentioned year 3 and that there certainly needs to be more out of him, and that the Chiefs do expect more out of him. I think a lot of times whenever you have a player on your team, like look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He was the number 32 pick for the Chiefs in 2020. And that was a pretty big deal because, and I think a lot of times, regardless whether you're a top 10 pick or if you're going to be number 32, or if you don't have a first round pick and your first draft pick comes in the second round, there are always going to be a lot of eyes on that guy. That player will always be treated like a first round pick. And the example I'm using here, a player I'm referencing, is Breeland Speaks, another defensive end who I think he's in the USFL now. He's actually doing I can't remember if it's the USFL or the Canadian Football League, but one of those leagues now. And he's actually thriving and doing really, really well. But during his time in Kansas City, and I think it was 2018, because the Chiefs gave up their 2018 first round pick to trade up to get Mahomes, Breeland Speaks was Kansas City's first draft pick that year in 2018, because the Chiefs did not have a first round pick. And so there were a lot of eyes on Breeland Speaks, essentially treated like a first round draft pick from the public eye. And he didn't do very well. A lot of people called him a bust. And I don't even think he played a full 2 years in Kansas City. So he did not last very long in the NFL, unfortunately. He moved on to, again, I can't remember if it was the USFL or CFL, but he's doing really well and whichever league he's in now. I do know that. I think he just led the league in sacks either last year or the year before. I don't know if you guys remember Maurice Leggett, a cornerback who, Miles Austin's first big game was against Maurice Leggett, where he just lit him up. 250 yards and that overtime win over the Chiefs. That was against Maurice Leggett. Maurice Leggett just did not do very well in Kansas City. In fact, I remember he won the Mackley Hill Award, which is the team rookie of the year. And that was because he was just at the right place at the right time, picking up a fumble and running it back for a touchdown. And then the Raiders had this really weird fake field goal where they just threw the ball in the middle of nowhere and he scooped it up and ran for a touchdown. So he just happened to be at the right place at the right time twice, and he won the team rookie of the year that year. That just tells you how bad the Chiefs draft class was that year. But anyway, my point is he did not end up having a very good career. And so he moved on and played in the Canadian Football League. He actually was a superstar in the CFL. I think he was an all-star, which, in the NFL, you call it a Pro Bowl, but in the CFL, they call it the all-star. He was an all-star, I think, multiple times. And I think he led the NFL in interceptions one year. So some of these players struggle in the NFL. The Chiefs have had a couple of those players, Maurice Leggett and Breeland Speaks. And they struggled in Kansas City and in the NFL, but they thrived outside of Kansas City. My whole point is with FAU is that kind of like Breeland Speaks, sure, he's a first-round pick, but he's a number 31 pick. You don't really expect much from players drafted in the late first round. And the Chiefs have, for good reasons, great reasons, in fact, they've been picking late every single year because they keep playing in the Super Bowl every year. Specifically, 5 times in the Patrick Mahomes era. And in the entire Patrick Mahomes era, they've been at the very least in the AFC Championship. So their draft selection is always very, very late. Now, if you remember, I can't remember what team it was. Somebody was fined a first-round draft pick. So the Chiefs, as reigning champions, picked 31st that year. And they drafted FAU, who is a local kid, Lee Summit, went to Kansas State and playing for his hometown team. And the place went nuts. Now, the Chiefs could have drafted a kicker that night because that was in Kansas City at Union Station. The Chiefs could have drafted a kicker or a punter, and Union Station would have still been popping, singing the Beastie Boys. So they could have drafted anyone, and it would have still been a huge deal, and fireworks would have went off. But there is that added hype because he's from Kansas City, went to K-State, went to a local college. he hasn't lived up to expectations like a first-round draft pick. And when you look at his career stats, 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery in 3 years. Those are just regular season stats. He does have a sack in the playoffs. And I will say his rookie year, he only played 1 playoff game, and that ended up being Super Bowl 58. And he played pretty damn well. Look at Treshaun Wharton and how he played in the Super Bowl this year. And I know the Super Bowl was just a disaster for the Chiefs, but if there's one good thing you could get out of that game, it's how Treshaun Wharton played against Saquon Barkley. The way Treshaun Wharton limited Saquon Barkley in that Super Bowl, you saw FAU do some of that against Christian McCaffrey. And that was the year when Christian McCaffrey, not that he had a Saquon Barkley type of season where Barkley almost got the single season rushing record, but Christian McCaffrey was just impossible to stop that year. Nobody was able to stop him. And the 49ers relied on him a lot in that game, and he did not end up having that big, great rushing type of game that he would have liked to have had in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. And FAU was partially responsible for it with a couple of big run stuffs. So FAU has had flashes. Now, again, regardless whether it's the number 31 or the number 32 pick in the draft or your number 1 overall pick in the draft, whenever you have a first-round draft pick, you don't ever draft them for flashes. That's the issue you had with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now, I will say with CEH, who's obviously moved on now, CEH, he was actually second in the league at one point, I think 8 or 9 weeks after the season, or into the season, excuse me. He was second in rushing yards behind Derrick Henry, who no one was going to catch Derrick Henry, but to have more rushing yards than everyone except for Derrick Henry, he was pretty damn good. Now, he did not end up having that kind of success moving on. He just didn't. And I think when you're looking at Kansas City and their first round picks, specifically with FAU, yeah, you need more out of him. And with Treshaun Wharton no longer there, you're going to need guys to step up. Obviously, they got Jerry Tillery. We'll see if they draft someone in the first round this year. But the defensive line in general, I think, needs to play better, especially with Jaden Hicks. I know we just talked about him, but you kind of fear, what if there's a possibility of him not living up to expectations? Well, a really strong defensive front would certainly help. And listen, the Chiefs had a good defensive front last year. Chris Jones was second among defensive tackles and quarterback pressures. In fact, a lot of Chiefs players were able to pressure quarterbacks, but they were always a half second late because the secondary would collapse. And the one game that sticks out to me the most is that Carolina Panthers game where Bryce Young dealt with pressure, dealt with all these Chiefs players in his face all game long, but he kept his composure and threw the ball when he needed to at the very last moment and found a lot of open receivers in that game. The Chiefs need to figure out defensively how to prevent that kind of thing. Because when you look at your secondary right now, you have Trent McDuffie. You know you're going to get great things out of him. You have Jalen Watson. You have Christian Fulton, who you brought in from the Chargers. So you'd like to think you've got a good group of cornerbacks there. Brian Cook, I would say is an above average safety for the Chiefs. Jaden Hicks is someone that people think is going to end up being a diamond in the rough looking back at that draft because he was taken in the 4th round. So there's some expectation that he could have, looking back, he'll be considered a steal in that draft. But if you have a defensive front that's very good, it can really alleviate a lot of the problems in the secondary. Now, last year wasn't always the case because as great as the Chiefs pass rush was, quarterbacks were always able to find that open receiver against the Chiefs. That was one of their biggest problems. So I'm hoping that this Chiefs defense can step up, and they could certainly use FAU's help with that. Listen, as long as FAU is still on the team, I guess the jury's still out on him. But I will say this, and listen, you guys know me, I'll keep it 100 with you guys every single time. If I had a meter, okay, like in the middle of the meter is we don't know, it's currently undecided, and on the far right, hey, that player's pretty good, and on the far left, it's a bust. I've got to say the meter is probably exactly between bust and we don't know yet. Because let's be honest, you don't draft an edge rusher in the first round to get 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, and 1 sack in the playoffs in his first 2 years. I said 3 years earlier. I apologize. I meant 2 years. He's got to be better than that. I think if you're Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo, you certainly need to have a conversation with him and say, look, you're a first round pick. We expect, like, forget about the fact that he's from Lee Summit and went to K-State. Forget about all of that. This is a first round draft pick. This is a guy that was brought in with some high expectations. The Chiefs need him to blossom into let's just say an above average defensive end. Because if he can do that, I think, okay, that first round pick number 31 can start to look a little good on the Chiefs and FAU. And I think it's going to help the defense quite a lot. Now, the Chiefs have Mike Dana. Mike Dana was good 2 years ago. I didn't think he was as good last year. And when you look across the board, obviously that big one, and I mentioned after the Super Bowl, my biggest concern was Treshaun Wharton, who ended up moving on to Carolina. You got back Mike Pennell, which I think is a good re-signing. And I think he could probably be, as of right now, I think he could be the starting defensive tackle on Friday, September the 5th, excuse me. Assuming that is the correct report, the Chiefs are going to play that day in Brazil. But you look at the rest of the defensive line, Charles Omenihu, who's played really well for the Chiefs in his 2 seasons. And never playing a full season either. One because of a suspension, and second season recovering from an ACL injury. He's had a strip sack in 2 postseason games. The AFC Championship game against Lamar Jackson, and I think he had one on CJ Stroud. It was either CJ Stroud or Josh Allen. I can't remember, but one of those quarterbacks in the playoffs. So, and by the way, they did sign Janarius Robinson, who was drafted, I think, by the Vikings and also played for the Raiders. So this defensive line could really use FAU's help, because if that happens, I think your defensive line will elevate, play better, and I think defensively as a whole, especially if you have a strong front, will play much better as well. Hey guys, we're going to take a quick break here and spend a moment to talk about my friends over at Fathead. Fathead has the best life-size wall graphics of your favorite players and team logos and has been going strong for almost 2 decades. Maybe you're looking to spice up your man cave where you watch all of your sports. Perhaps you want to add to your room where you have all of your sports memorabilia. You can get something that looks cool for your kid's bedroom. Or maybe you're a Swiftie and you want Taylor Swift's boyfriend as part of your celebrity wall. Fathead is the place to go, and if you're a Chiefs fan, you can get fatheads of your favorite current and former Chiefs players such as Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tony Gonzalez, Derek Thomas, and more. For those of you watching on the live stream, look for my exclusive Fathead link in the comments right now. And for those listening to the audio version, look for my exclusive Fathead link in the podcast description. When you use my link, you will get free standard US shipping when you place an order on Fathead. Use my exclusive Fathead link, get yourself some Chiefs Fathead swag, and take advantage of free shipping in the United States. All right, wrapping up the show here with a couple of topics left. I think the Chiefs have done a good job with everything they could, all things considered, with their salary cap restrictions in terms of re-signing players. And they've obviously added a couple this year. No major names. I think they were certainly in the running for Ronnie Stanley, especially if you traded Joe Thuney. That was the hope. But luckily for the Ravens, they were able to re-sign him and keep him and not let him go to a conference rival, essentially. Now, when you look at the rest of the Chiefs on their roster right now, What's the one glaring hole on Kansas City's roster? I would argue the two positions I would say are left guard and defensive tackle beside Chris Jones. Now, I did mention Mike Pennell last segment and how I feel he could be that week one starter for the Chiefs. Left guard, who's going to start at left guard? I know there's all this speculation about Kingsley Suamataia, and he did play some left guard in the Week 18 game against Denver. But I don't know if that's for sure yet. They obviously re-signed Mike Caliendo. They brought him back. Is it possible that Hunter Norzad or CJ Hansen, they convert to left guard? I like Hunter Norzad's pass blocking abilities. I think he's very good at it. In fact, if you go rewatch that Week 18 game, and I know there was really nothing good to get out of that game because it was all backups and the Chiefs lost that game 38-0. But Hunter Norzad played really well. Now, as a center, had some low snaps. But Creed Humphreys has some low snaps, so that's okay. But the Chiefs have Creed Humphrey, who's not going away anytime soon, provided he stays healthy. And despite the bad snaps, Hunter Norzad was a really good pass blocker, and that's against a very good Broncos defensive front, which, by the way, led the league in sacks. So, because I mentioned this, and people were questioning, why do you think Hunter Norzad could be so good? Because when the Broncos needed to win that game against the Chiefs to make the playoffs, Hunter Norzad, when he came in for the Chiefs, he played really well against Denver's defensive front. And again, to be clear, that game, the Chiefs had their starting offensive lineman out there, but only for a series, which they had a lot of short series, a lot of short drives in that game. So the starting offensive line didn't really do much, and the backups played after that first drive. But I'm telling you right now, if you're the Chiefs and there's a really good left guard available, do you take that left guard? Possibly. If you see a defensive tackle, do you take a defensive tackle? Yeah, maybe. I think those are the first two positions of need if you're Kansas City. But let me ask this question here. If you're Kansas City and Luther Burden is available at number 31, what do you do? Because obviously the only team picking after the Chiefs is the Eagles. Would the Eagles take Luther Burden? Part of me wants to say no. But at the same time, I'm thinking, if the Eagles want to repeat here, don't they want to add to what they have with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson, and their tight end Dallas Goedert? Like, wouldn't Luther Burden just give Jalen Hurts everything he needs? I mean, good. That Philadelphia Eagles offense with Saquon Barkley in the backfield. And by the way, I thought Will Shipley played really well last year also in the few times he played. And that's a player who possesses great speed. Now, look at the Chiefs. If you add Luther Burden, what does your offense look like? Well, you have Pacheco and Hunt and Elijah Mitchell, maybe Carson Steele's still on the team. Maybe they draft somebody like a Cam Scatterbo or a Devin Neal, or maybe someone like Giddens from K-State. But what about pass catchers? Well, you have Kelsey and Noah Gray. Noah Gray, who made that really big step up last year in 2024. But what about the wide receivers? You have Hollywood Brown, who had that freak accident last year on the first preseason snap. You have Rashee Rice, who prior to that injury made that big step up from year one to year two. And he was on the top 5 in receptions, yards, and touchdown catches up until his injury. Then you have Xavier Worthy, who really grew into his own and started to play much better as the season went on. In fact, I think he had the most, he tied for most touchdowns, rushing and receiving among rookies. What happens if you add Luther Burden to that mix in the depth with Juju Smith-Schuster and possibly Nico Remigio? And I don't know who that other receiver would be, whether it's Sky Moore Tyquan Thornton, or maybe somebody else you draft this year. If you're Kansas City, Luther Burden is not a player that you need on your offense. However, yeah, see, Ogle says they don't need a wideout. I agree. They don't need one in the first round. But if Luther Burden is right there, and it's a surprise to me that a lot of people in mock drafts are having him fall, because that's a shocker to me. And I don't really know all the details to that, and I suppose it'll come out when the experts like Mel Kiper and all those people provide their analysis on the night of the draft, whether it's night 1, night 2, whenever he gets drafted, because he's expected to fall, which again is a surprise to me. If Luther Burden is at 31, as we it seems like we agree on this, he's not a need. But dude, it would be really hard to say no to Luther Burden. That'd be a really difficult pass. I mean, you'll still have open holes at left guard and defensive tackle. Now you can always address those later in the draft, and listen, we've seen the Chiefs come away with some big draft picks in later rounds, especially in the second round. Chris Jones, Creed Humphrey, Nick Bolton, and then later on in the draft, I mean, obviously they got Tyreek Hill. I know Tyreek Hill had that alleged incident. I say alleged because word got out later about certain, it was in question what had really happened in college with him and his ex at the time. But Trey Smith, obviously, a former 6th round pick, and now a guy who is possibly going to get the biggest contract for an offensive guard next year, whether it's in Kansas City or elsewhere. Hopefully it's in Kansas City. I just feel like, as important as it is to address the left guard spot and the defensive tackle spots, Kansas City cannot say no to Luther Burden. They just can't. Last year, when Xavier Worthy, all the hype about him, because Xavier Worthy was supposed to fall late second round. That was like the projection. But I think what he did at the combine really stood out. And I think that helped his draft stock by a whole round, because the Chiefs traded up to get him in the first round. He ended up being a much more impactful player in the playoffs than Keon Coleman, who the Bills traded with the Chiefs to do so. Keon Coleman only had 1 catch each of the 3 playoff games the Bills played. So I think that just shows you how important of a player Xavier Worthy is to the Chiefs and how well they utilized him. But I just feel like if Luther Burden's available at 31, which I'd be shocked, but I guess it is a possibility, boy, I think you got to do it. I think you've got to take Luther Burden. Not because he's a Mizzou guy or a local guy, anything like that. I mean, listen, I'm a Jayhawk guy, but when it comes to the NFL, I don't care about these things too much. You got to take the guy. And I think, if he has attitude problems or anything like that, Andy Reid's given second chances to players. A lot of players, in fact. So if Luther Burden could benefit from, not that, he's getting a second chance, but I guess there's some word out there about his work ethic and his attitude. I guess if there's one player that could maybe help him out with all of that, it's certainly Andy Reid. Listen, in Andy Reid's full tenure in Kansas City, which has been since 2013, there's only one player that's ever had anything bad to say about Andy Reid, and that was Le'Veon Bell. A great running back, especially during his time in Pittsburgh. But it's like, look, if there's a teacher who everyone liked and everyone got A's from, but for whatever reason, you and the teacher just clashed for whatever reason, and you were the only person that failed, majority of the time it's probably because of the student and not the teacher. So I think we can safely disregard whatever Le'Veon Bell has had to say about Andy Reid. And he's gone back and deleted those posts because he saw the backlash he was getting. But I think, listen, Luther Burden could probably learn a thing or two non-football wise from Andy Reid. And obviously football wise, he could certainly learn a lot in this offense. And when you're surrounded by all the players the Chiefs have on offense, that could really bode well for this Chiefs team. They still would need help on left guard, and I know left tackle is still a question mark to some people, but I suppose if Luther Burton's there at 31, there's no way you could say no to that. There's just no way. By the way, for those of you asking questions, I said this would be a conjunction, a Red Friday live chat and a Chiefs Zone podcast conjunction, because there's a lot of things. There were some things in the news regarding the Chiefs. So if you guys have questions, post them below and I'll get to those shortly. I see a few of those in the last 10, 15 minutes. So I'll answer some of those after this last topic here I want to get into. I want to discuss the tush push for a moment here, because the owners were supposed to vote on it this week. The Packers proposed a rule to ban the tush push. This ended up being tabled. And the Packers are apparently rewriting the rule, the proposal, and they're going to vote on it in May, which I find kind of interesting. Now, I will say this. If your criticism of the tush push is, why is that allowed when defensive players can't do the same thing? Fair enough. I can't fight back against that. I wish instead the focus was allow defensive players to do the same thing instead of banning the tush push. I don't think the tush push should be banned just because the Eagles are really good at it and no one else can take advantage of it. That's not a good reason to ban something. And for people who are saying, oh, it's a boring play, well, dink and dunk passes are boring also. Why are we not banning those? That's not a good enough reason to ban something. And for anyone mentioning injuries, well, there's not really enough data that shows that a lot of injuries occur during the tush push. But here's the thing. Let's say the tush push gets banned, and I think it will get banned. I think they'll get the majority that they need. I think the Eagles will be just fine without the tush push. Now, in short yardage situations, whenever the Eagles need just 1 yard or inches, the tush push really gives them 3 or 4 extra yards sometimes. Without the tush push, I think the Eagles will be just fine running a regular quarterback sneak. They're not going to get those 3 or 4 extra yards, but they'll get enough. I mean, you're only going to run the quarterback sneak if you only have 1 yard to go for a first down, or if you're at the 1 yard line trying to score a touchdown. And by the way, if you don't want to run the quarterback sneak, guess what? The Eagles have a running back by the name of Saquon Barkley. You've probably heard of him. He will easily get that 1 yard 9 times out of 10. So if you want the tush push banned in hopes that the Eagles will struggle from this, I think you're in for a rude awakening here, because the Eagles, of all teams, I think will be just fine. I think they'll be just fine running a quarterback sneak on 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, or giving it to Saquon Barkley and getting that 1 yard that they would need from him in those short yardage situations. They're not going to struggle from this. They're just not. All right. Let me answer some questions here. Let's see. Where is the first question? Kyle says, what about Elijah Mitchell? Yeah, Elijah Mitchell. When the Chiefs signed Elijah Mitchell from the 49ers, I was a little worried. I thought that really spelled the end of Kareem Hunt's second stint in Kansas City. Fortunately, that was not the case. And when I mentioned Kareem Hunt re-signed with the Chiefs on my social media, all of you guys went nuts over this one. I think there are always... There's always that one player that a lot of people really, really, really hope comes back. So I remember 2 years in a row, the Chiefs re-signed Jerick McKinnon to 1-year deals, and Chiefs fans were excited when he came back. Everyone was happy that he came back to Kansas City rather than going elsewhere. And this offseason, I would argue, I think the re-signing that a lot of Chiefs fans celebrated the most was Kareem Hunt coming back. And obviously, listen, when you talk about Kareem Hunt, you can't really tell the story about Kareem Hunt without mentioning what happened at the end of his first stint. The video came out. The Chiefs were not happy. They cut him. He goes to Cleveland, does well in Cleveland, but then he becomes available. No one's signing him. And the Chiefs, when they really need help, they're in desperate need of help, they go and get Kareem Hunt. I don't know what that running back field is going to look like with Pacheco, who's expected to rebound and play better now that he has more time to recover, freshen up, recharge his batteries, and hopefully his ankle will be much better going into training camp and week 1. Kareem Hunt, I think he can also benefit from a full offseason, going through OTAs, having a training camp, having a preseason. I think that'll really help out as well. I really hope the Chiefs can split the carries down the line between Pacheco and Hunt. I think they really could both benefit from that, and I think the Chiefs offense will benefit from that as well. Now, how does Elijah Mitchell fit into the fold with the running back group? I don't know. Is that a guy that can do what Jerick McKinnon did, do what Samaje Perine did? Because Samaje Perine was essentially a Jerick McKinnon, was just 15, 20 pounds bigger. So I think that's the role. And here's the thing. I was hoping the Chiefs would have used Samaje Perine more last year. I mean, I'm not saying he was useless or anything like that. He definitely came through in the AFC Championship game with that catch. But I just felt like the Chiefs could have used them more in certain situations, and they didn't. But that's just the way things panned out, I guess. I don't know what Elijah Mitchell's workload is going to look like, provided, you have a healthy roster, which is never going to be the case. And we certainly saw that last year. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. What's the point of having good or great receivers if your QB can't get them the ball because of protection? I mean, that's a really good question, which is why I posed that question about Luther Burden. And it's like, listen, if Luther Burden is at 31, it's hard to pass on him, man. It just is. And I'm not disregarding what you said. I even brought this up myself. My whole thing is, and because I mentioned in the topic of Luther Burden, if you're Kansas City, you can find guys in later rounds. You've done this in the past. I mean, the Chiefs, look at their 2022 draft class. They found a lot of great players outside of the first round. Same with the 2021 first round, the 2021 draft class. The 2023 draft class, not as great, but they got Rashee Rice in the second round. And I mean, listen, we can't call him elite just yet. He's I don't want to say he's far from it, but he certainly has that potential. He's proven that he can do it. He just needs to stay healthy. Had that terrible, friendly fire with Patrick Mahomes. Hopefully something like that doesn't happen again. Hopefully Mahomes has certainly learned. I mean, listen, it's just weird that Mahomes, it's like the team refuses to run a quarterback sneak with him. And then he does that. Just, I know it was a frustrating 5 plays because in their first 5 offensive plays, they had 2 turnovers. It's like, come on. I just feel like if you're Kansas City, you take Luther Burden, but left guard's got to be the absolute most important position you go after with either your late second round pick or your early third round pick. I feel like it's got to be one of those 2 picks has to be left guard, unless the Chiefs absolutely feel great about Kingsley Suamataia playing left guard, which I don't think they do. I'll say this right now. Whenever Andy Reid has spoken to the media a little bit lately, but I don't think he's been asked about Kingsley Suamataia at left guard. I don't think he has. So surely that's got to be asked at some point before the Chiefs have their draft. Farzine, please give your take on the KU portal mess. I'll be completely honest with you. I don't follow college sports as closely as I used to. I will say this with KU right now. I think they're kind of just learning, especially on the basketball side of things. It's like this NIL, having a hard time saying it, this NIL deal, I think does kind of provide a balance in college sports. And I think it does hurt the powerhouse college programs like the KUs of the world. Look, I hate to say it. I mean, there are some fantastic college programs out there. But if you're a college football or a college basketball player, and I suppose you could say the same about baseball and softball, but those sports are not as coveted by the media. College sports truly, and I think even more so now because of NIL, it's all about, look, I'm here to boost my resume. Sure, if we win championships or bowl games, whatever, or make a Final Four, great. But I'm here to let all those pro scouts know I can play ball. I think that's what college sports is really what it's going to turn into. So I kind of worry about that kind of thing. Not just with KU, but just college sports as a whole. That's what worries me with this whole NIL and this portal mess. But yeah, not a great answer, but that's what I have to say about that. Will Nico Remigio get a chance to be on game day roster this season? I've talked about this before. I will say, I think Nico Remigio is someone that you have to seriously consider for two reasons. Number one, I think I think he was your best return specialist last year. He had that big kick return to open up the divisional round against the Texans. Now, the Chiefs unfortunately could not capitalize off that, but didn't really matter too much since they won the game. But you certainly cannot let those turn into field goals. You've got to get a touchdown out of that. And then a week later in the AFC Championship game, I think it was a 41-yard punt return, and the Chiefs quickly turned that into a touchdown drive. Whenever you get a big kick return or a big punt return, and those don't happen often because, first of all, the kick return rules, which are, I mean, that whole deal is a disaster. The kick return rules make it so where we're not going to see as many kickoff returns for touchdowns or just big kick returns in general. Punt returns, here's the thing about punt returns now. We're kind of in an era where athletes in general are just more freakishly talented than athletes in the past. So that includes kickers and punters. I mean, we have kickers. Shannon Sharp mentioned this once before. There are kickers that can make 55-yarders, 60-yarders into the net just fine. Now, I think coaches, a lot of these coaches, they've been around the game a long time, so some of them have that old school mentality. They may not trust their kickers entirely, but we see it often now. I mean, look at a guy like Tyler Bass, who, when you think of him, you think of his miss against Kansas City in that divisional round game against Buffalo, but they had him, I think it was a 62-yarder against Miami. They had him go kick that, and he made it, and the Bills won the game because of that. So my whole point is, and I include punters, who are, again, more gifted and more talented than the punters in the past. You have punters that can have that booming kick sky high, or some of them who have a cannon for a leg like Matt Ariza, and they just basically nullify these return specialists. But Nico Remigio in back-to-back weeks in the playoffs, that dude had big returns. It had that big kick return against the Texans to open up the game, and had that big punt return to help give the Chiefs a nice little boost, and they turned it into a quick touchdown drive. Now, whenever someone like that is thriving on special teams, you certainly have to look at, offensively what they can do as well. I know Nico Remigio has had some really good moments in the preseason. And Dave Toub, Andy Reid, around this time last year, in May, June, July, when they're preparing for, what they were preparing for 2024, Andy Reid and Dave Toub had a lot of great things, and Matt Nagy as well, to say about Nico Remigio. So I think that's a player who the Chiefs are going to look at, because let's look at the Chiefs wide receivers right now. Okay, you have Worthy, Hollywood, and Rice. Those are your three top guys. No question about it. You have Juju Smith-Schuster. I think that's someone who the Chiefs really, really like. They obviously re-signed him for a reason, and they brought him back for a second stint right after he got cut by the Patriots, even before the 53-man roster cut. So I think that's going to be your fourth receiver on the team and someone that's going to be active on offense. Now, who's after Juju? I think it's wide open. Now, I mentioned Luther Burden. He sounds like he might fall and be available. But what about Justin Ross? There's all this hype behind Justin Ross, but we're not seeing it. I mean, the guy was on the practice squad for a majority of the season. So when someone's on the practice squad, another team can acquire that player. Nobody was willing to do that, despite all this hype from Justin Ross. Sky Moore, I know the Chiefs don't want to give up on a second-round pick, but I think enough time has passed to where this guy's just not getting it done for you. Tyquan Thornton didn't work out in New England. He's got a great skill set, so maybe that could work out in Kansas City. And you also have Jason Brownlee, and then you have Nico Remigio. Obviously, the Chiefs will add at least one, maybe two receivers following draft weekend. So either they'll draft one or two guys, maybe they don't draft a receiver at all, and they end up picking a couple of undrafted free agents that'll be on the team for training camp. But my whole point is, I don't think there's really much. Like, you have four for sure receivers that you know you like and that they're going to be on your main roster. I think Nico Remigio is going to get some serious looks on offense this year. I really hope he does, because I think, there's when someone's thriving that well on special teams, I think there's that possibility, okay, maybe they can do some things on offense, and maybe we could even be surprised as coaches too. So I think Nico Remigio is for sure on the 53-man roster, and I think someone that could get more looks on offense this upcoming season. Last question here. This is from Greg. He says, isn't the offensive line depth pretty deep this draft? Yes, it is. And now here's the thing. We hear this a lot. In that interview I mentioned, Kay Adams had with FAU, Kay Adams mentioned that this is a really deep class for defensive tackles as well. When you hear that, you'd like to think someone really good would be available at number 31, but we kind of talked about how if Luther Burden's available, well, God, man, like the Chiefs could definitely use that, and that would bode well for Kansas City's offense. So if there's a really deep offensive line class this year, is it possible you could find someone that could fit that guard spot if you pick in the second round or early third? Because the Chiefs have 2 draft picks. And let me pull out what it is. I know their second round pick is 63rd. So they have the 63rd pick, and they have the 66th pick, from Tennessee because of the L'Jarius Sneed trade. So they kind of have, they had this in 2008 with all those draft picks they had in the second and third rounds, where they can kind of control their own board. So they can get an offensive guard or a defensive tackle, or maybe even a running back if that's a position they really like. If a Cam Scatterboo is available, kind of hard to say no to a guy like that as well. Surely with the 63rd or the 66th pick, Kansas City's going to take a guard. I would almost bet that if they don't do it in the first round, I would bet they do it with one of those 2 picks, 63 or 66. I'm just looking at those draft picks right now. If Luther Burden's available, I think they're taking Luther Burden 31. 63rd overall, 66 overall. I think at 63, they take a guard. And at 66, if Scatterboo is still available, take him. If Devin Neal is there, take him. I know Giddens, DJ Giddens. I mean, that guy, he's got some hype. A lot of people feel like he's an underrated running back entering this draft class. So I would say, that's an option as well. That would really help the offense a lot. It really would. Now, I recognize with those first 3 draft picks, you're taking all offense. I mean, the defense needs a little bit of help too. I don't think they need as much help, But we'll see. I've seen some mock drafts where the Chiefs would be taking an edge rusher at number 31 or at number 63. I don't think the Chiefs go that route. I think they like what they have with Karlaftis, Omenihu, Mike Dana, and FAU, who we've spent a lot of time talking about. So those are my draft thoughts, specifically within the first 3 rounds for the Chiefs. All right. That'll do it for this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast, combining this with the Red Friday live chat. Thank you all for joining me tonight on this Red Friday. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of your Red Friday and your weekend. It is April. We are less than a month away from the NFL draft. We'll have a lot more draft talk in upcoming podcasts. And I'm sure we'll be back probably doing a couple podcasts next week. So I will talk to all of you then. Thank you. Take care. Enjoy. Have a good weekend.